I'm a farmer through and through, raised on soil, sweat, and long days under an unforgiving sun. This land isn't just where I live, it's an inheritance, history, something my family bled into long before me. Unfortunately, it also sits right next to a polished estate that got swallowed whole by a power-hungry HOA called Shadow Creek. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't despise everyone over there. A few of them are decent folks. We've shared cold beers, traded jokes across fence lines, and even helped each other out when storms rolled through. But every peaceful place eventually grows a problem. And this one had a name. Grace, HOA president, clipboard always in hand, a walking rulebook with a smile as dry as week-old toast. I had just finished a brutal 12-hour day hauling feed, fixing a busted tractor belt, and chasing down a goat that thought freedom was a personality trait when I pulled into my gravel drive and saw her, Grace, standing at my gate like she owned the dirt beneath her feet. Welcome Tummy channel, make sure you like and subscribe for your premium HOA chaos. At first, I figured maybe she might be lost, or returning a borrowed tool, or showing up with some fake friendly excuse neighbors use when they really just want to snoop. But no, clipboard clutched like a weapon, lips tight with that "I'm here to cause trouble" look only the worst kind of suburban dictator can master. I climbed out of my truck, exhausted and irritable. My boots were still caked with manure, my neck was on fire from the sun, and yet here I was face to face with an HOA invasion. Evening, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. She didn't smile. Mr. Bennett? She asked, scanning her papers like I was on a watch list. That's me. I'm here representing the Shadow Creek HOA board. We've received reports of unauthorized commercial activity on this property, specifically illegal short-term rentals. As HOA president, I'm obligated to investigate. I stared at her. Ma'am, this is a working farm. Nobody's booking vacations next to chickens and cow pies. Didn't matter. We take community standards very seriously. If your property falls within the shared zoning buffer, we have the right to inspect. Your cabin was included in the original Shadow Creek boundary map. That was absolute nonsense, and she knew it. She just wanted access. And I wasn't opening that gate. Before we go any further, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Grace stood there, eyes twitching like she couldn't process someone telling her no. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, like her brain needed a reboot. Refusal to cooperate, she finally said, scribbling furiously on her clipboard, will result in legal consequences. I didn't answer. I just leaned against the gatepost and watched her unravel. She wasn't used to pushback. She dealt with neat townhouses and neighbors who caved the moment she cleared her throat. But this wasn't trimmed hedges and matching mailboxes. This was my land, my dogs, my rules. She pulled out her phone and started snapping photos like she was assembling a federal case. Unpermitted structures, she said, photographing my woodshed. Potential code violations, animal safety risks. Structural hazards. I blinked. That's a chicken coop, I said. And the only hazard out here is you. She ignored me completely, spun on her heel, and stomped back to her SUV as my existence offended her personally. Before speeding off, she leaned out the window and shouted, "Expect a full inspection. The board will be present," like she was summoning some HOA superhero team. I wasn't shocked. The next day, my neighbor Frank texted me, Grace is running her mouth at the meeting. Says you're hiding Airbnb guests and keeping unregistered dogs. I sent him a laughing emoji and went back to stacking hay. But deep down, I knew she meant business. Grace didn't throw empty threats. She planned them. She was the type who read her HOA handbook for pleasure. 3 days later, I had to head out of town to pick up tractor parts. I figured things might cool off while I was gone. I locked the cabin, posted fresh private property and beware of dogs signs on every gate, and filled the feeders. My 2 dogs, Bear and Grizzle, roamed freely. They weren't vicious, but if you didn't belong there, they'd make sure you left knowing it. What I didn't expect was Grace showing up again that very same afternoon. She must have noticed my truck was gone and figured that meant she had permission. No witnesses, no pushback. Just her, a clipboard, and a delusion of total authority. What she didn't factor in was that she wasn't alone on that land. I was halfway upstate collecting tractor parts when my phone buzzed. Motion alert, East Gate. At first, I assumed it was a deer, or maybe a bear, stirring things up again. Happens all the time. But when I opened the live camera feed and saw a familiar purple blouse squeezing through my side fence clipboard still clutched like a badge of self-importance, my blood pressure shot through the roof. Grace had actually crossed the line. She was trespassing. In broad daylight, clear as could be. She ducked beneath one of the security cameras and marched toward the cabin, muttering to herself like she was chanting some bureaucratic spell. This woman didn't just overlook warning signs, she openly declared war on them. What she had no idea about, what her arrogance wouldn't allow her to consider, was that cameras weren't my only safeguard. Bear and Grizzle had been stretched out under the porch all morning. The second she stepped onto the gravel path, both their heads snapped up like synchronized radar dishes. I watched in disbelief as Grace pushed through the second gate, the one with the bold red "Do Not Enter" lifeguard dog sign. Either she didn't see it, or she thought rules didn't apply to her. Either way, it was a catastrophic mistake. Bear moved first. He's quick and quiet until the very last second. Grace didn't realize he was there until he was feet away. She screamed and tried to retreat, but tripped over her own clipboard, flailing like a cartoon character before slamming flat onto her back in the dirt. Grizzle came right behind him, barking like hell itself had been unleashed. They didn't go for the throat, they're trained better than that, but they also weren't about to welcome a trespasser with tail wags. She took a bite to the leg, a scratch along her arm, and a generous coating of slobber and torn fabric before scrambling away, shrieking as if her entire HOA kingdom had just crumbled. I called 911 immediately, explained everything, and shared the footage in real time. They told me to stay on the line and dispatched emergency services. By the time I got back, paramedics were already tending to her at the very edge of my property. She was shouting about rabies, lawsuits, and canine assault, conveniently ignoring the fact that she was the one who broke in. The sheriff pulled me aside and said calmly, "You're fine. We saw the whole thing." Grace did exactly what someone like her would do. She pressed charges, claimed I'd sixed vicious animals on an innocent citizen performing neighborhood duties. She showed up to court limping with a crutch. She didn't need bandages covering scratches that were already healing, and that same smug clipboard stuffed into her oversized purse like some cursed relic. What she didn't bring, however, was authority, evidence, or even a single legal foot to stand on. Turns out my land isn't just outside the HOA, it was never part of it. Not then, not ever. No annex, no buffer zone. Her so-called community integrity boundary was pure HOA fantasy. The judge reviewed the footage, Grace stepping past private property signs, ignoring the red "Beware of Dogs" warning, crossing every legal line on camera. He didn't even let her attorney finish before dismissing the case outright. I could have sued her. Trespassing, defamation, fraud, emotional distress. I could have buried her in legal fees alone. But I wanted something cleaner, something final. So instead, I filed a restraining order. Grace is now legally prohibited from coming within 300 feet of my land, my dogs, my mailbox, my fence, my tractor, my goats, and probably my scarecrow too. And since her injuries were the direct result of her own negligence, she was fined by the county for zoning violations and for triggering emergency services without cause. The HOA, desperate to save face, quietly removed her from the board. But the damage was done. Someone leaked the video. It hit Facebook, then TikTok, then the town newsletter under the headline, "HOA Karen meets country justice. Peace returned to my farm. The gates stay locked. The cameras stay on." And Grace, well, she learned the hard way what happens when you trespass where you don't belong. The end. Like and subscribe for more HOA showdowns.